Good evening and welcome to Talk Gnosis. Tonight our topic is solo practice versus practicing in an organized Gnostic community. This is a topic that's often asked by our viewers, many times by our not only our listeners, but also friends and people who just are starting to get acquainted with Gnosticism. So we thought we would address it tonight. Good evening, Bishop Petersen. How are you this evening?
I am wonderful, Bishop Canterbury. How are you?
Good. Well, this is a topic, like I just mentioned, that I think we often get asked. I think on an individual basis, I know that I have many listeners, send me messages. I'm sure you as well. When I'm even kind of discussing these things out in the public, I get this probably asked. At least half of the questions come to me is usually regarding solo practices, regarding working in an organized community. Why don't we jump right into this? What do you think are some of the hardships of a solo practice?
Well, I think that from what people have told me, and we've heard about this, as you said, a lot, from individuals that we know, as well as viewers of the show, is that there's the lack of community, the lack of people who get it, the lack of ability to sit down with people to worship together, or even to study together. Sometimes there's a lack of mentorship, but there's a kind of a loneliness, I think, that can come about for people who have to operate in solo practice, usually because they don't have any choice. There is no established Gnostic community or even an esoteric community in their local area. So I think for many people, it is loneliness. It's the lack of mentorship, and it's the lack of support. And I know that that's really tough for a lot of people.
Well, absolutely. And I would probably then follow that up is, do you see any of the same type of hardships or hardships in any group practice?
Oh yeah, plenty of that. I mean, for one thing, you have community, and community has its upsides and its downsides. And so if you're operating in a community, you've got politics, for one thing. You have people who you don't like, they don't like you. You might be working with leadership that you don't agree with, or leadership that's even, incompetent. So I mean, there are politics and there are personal difficulties that can happen in community practice, and for some people, that just becomes overwhelming, and they decide to scoot and go back to solo practice because they've just kind of had it with trying to work with other people. So there's two sides to community here. I think the one advantage to working in a community is that you're not alone, and there is some possibility for growth and that sort of thing. But the advantage to working on your own completely is that you're not necessarily going to be tethered to people who could be dragging you down or wasting your energy. So, again, there's two sides to that coin of community.
Absolutely. One of the questions sometimes asked of me is, where does the solo practitioner gather the resources?
Yeah.
And I kind of just roll my eyes at that one, like, really? I've been involved in this for over 30 years. Over 30 years that I've been initiated into various esoteric schools and also ordained in the Gnostic Church. Longer than that, when I first started studying all of this. But I mean, back in our day, back in my day, what did we have? We were blessed if we could find, some decent bookstores that had a few esoteric books or any esoteric sections at all. And you really had to go out searching for things. Today with the internet, I mean, really, you can put something into a Google search engine and find lots of resources out there. I think the biggest problem, though, for students is able to kind of discern what is useful information and what is not useful information. And I really think that is where kind of working in a group atmosphere, where that really, in my opinion, kind of, man, if you got the opportunity to work in a good group, this is one thing you're going to get from the group that you just can't get working solo.
Yeah, I think that you make a good point, is that there is this incredible, there's riches of material out there, but it can be very difficult at times to determine
Hmm.
what's worth looking at and what's not, and trying to sort through it, particularly if you have somebody who's a beginner. That
Hmm.
can be a very difficult issue. And that can be helpful in a group setting. Sometimes it can be a little bit easier to work together on discerning that. Of
Hmm.
course, if there's, if your group is toxic or just clueless, you can really get off on the wrong path with that as well. That there's that possibility. What I personally might suggest to people, I mean, we've had shows on books before, but what I might suggest is that when people are looking for materials, obviously there are the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which are available for people to read
Hmm.
online. You can get them in bookstores, Amazon. The Bible, the canonical scriptures, which I think are immensely useful.
Hmm.
But I might suggest that people on this path begin with practice, not so much just constantly trying to read theory or ideas but practice. I might suggest our own father, Tony Sylvia's book, Sanctuary of the Sacred Flame, A Guide to Jonite Spiritual Practice. Now, it was written for people who are part of the Jonite Church,
Hmm.
but certainly there are some great ideas in there for anybody that can certainly be modified for any form of practice. You don't have to be a Jonite or follow that particular model. There's also June Singer's Gnostic Book of Hours,
Hmm.
which is based on, it's a very Jungian, but it's basically a Jungian reflections, meditations on certain Gnostic scriptures. And the idea behind the discipline of the hours is that you are, throughout the day, you stop to read and meditate on these scriptures and pray. So those could be some great ways to get started in practice. And I think that I'm going to argue that a person who is practicing might have a lot more discernment than a person who isn't.
Right, and I would have to totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
It's one thing we always kind of stress to our listeners and our viewers is practice, practice, practice. You can do all the reading in the world, isn't going to make a lot of difference. May make you an intellectual, may make you pretty smart on certain topics, but you don't have any real application. So
Yeah.
practice, practice, practice. And, and I would have to agree with you. The book by June Singer is an excellent beginning practice, or even a continual practice for anyone who's kind of on the Gnostic path.
Yeah.
Um, so we've kind of touched bases a little bit on maybe some of the advantages of working solo, but a question asked of me, and I sort of want to get your reaction on this first, is that I think one of the advantages people see when they go to a Gnostic community, especially a sacramental
Hmm.
Gnostic community like we both participate in, is that they're able to experience the sacraments, and
Yes.
specifically a Gnostic Mass or Gnostic liturgy. Um, a question asked of me frequently is, can a sole practitioner practice the sacraments?
Okay. Well, I think it's an interesting question. Certainly, it's going to depend on how orthodox, small orthodox, the
Mhm.
practice, the community is, or the lack of community. If you're asking somebody who is part of the apostolic succession, who places a big emphasis on that particular tradition,
Mhm.
the real difficulty is an individual who is not ordained to the priesthood cannot perform the actual sacrifice of the Mass
Mhm.
and take it and that way. So that makes that very difficult. Now, it is possible to supply an individual with a pre-consecrated host so that they can serve themselves.
Mhm.
And so that's a real possibility there. The other thing is that that an individual who wants to be able to participate in the sacraments may need to develop a relationship with somebody, uh, with clergy elsewhere, and say, okay, can I come out to visit you once or twice a year? Is it possible for you to come visit my community?
Mhm.
That's a possibility as well. Now, there are going to be some Gnostics who say nuts to all that. I don't believe in a priesthood, and I'm going to practice the sacraments on my own. And that can be very, very legitimate for them. So I think that, it's going to depend on how orthodox your theology is on this point. And but I would say that definitely for a person who is interested in the apostolic gnosis, who is interested in those sacraments, is going to have to develop a relationship, even at a distance, with a Gnostic clergy person, and the two of them can work out together how they want to go about this.
Interesting. I would agree with a lot of those points. Now, what I would probably differ on this is that even though I totally support the idea of apostolic gnosis, obviously, being a Gnostic bishop, I definitely fall within that spectrum of accepting the idea of the egregore of apostolic succession and everything that entails. But that being said, I also do think that those with sincere intent, those with a certain purity of heart, and can basically kind of forge, if you will, their own magical link, is that that real initiation, as we're both aware, real ordination, doesn't really take place in my hands. I may be placing my hands upon you. I may be breathing upon your head. I may be uttering a sacred word within your ear. But it is truly, in the case of Christian gnosis, it is Christ who is the initiator. And it is the Holy Spirit that is descending down upon them. So in essence, I am just acting in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. So can someone be ordained, without someone ordaining them? I feel absolutely they can, and I would not, deny them that. Does that necessarily mean that any apostolic group is going to recognize their ordination? No, not necessarily. Yeah. But I would say that, they can have, the rights to performing sacraments. I remember when I was young, before I was exposed to any of this, I had basically picked up a book on kind of a mystical form of sacraments that I used to perform on a regular basis. And for me, it was a very empowering thing to do. Later on, once I had received the empowerment of a priest through apostolic succession, it was something totally different than what I had experienced before. But I would still say that even getting into that practice was a great practice for me. Now, back though to what you were saying, if they can get themselves involved with some group, even if it's just, once a month, once every 2 months, once every 3 months, once every 4 months even, and where they are meeting with someone, getting some mentorship, also maybe getting some pre-consecrated hosts so that they can perform a liturgy. I think that's even better. But again, I think, we're sort of trying to maybe address for people who don't necessarily have that. Both you and I, at one point, I came from a large city. I was born and raised in Chicago. It was pretty easy to kind of find groups around Chicago. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have the occult bookstore, and even before the internet, there were bulletin boards up in the store and all sorts of groups advertising. And that's how I actually got involved in Martinism and the French Gnostic tradition, was from a bulletin board in the occult bookstore. So, maybe a little bit more effort for people to have to actually go out and search. But I think if they search, sometimes they can find, even if not groups necessarily within their community, they may be able to find something within an hour or two of their house. And I would say it's definitely worth their while to at least go check them out, and maybe even some involvement.
And then the other possibility is that you may not be able to find a Gnostic group in your community, but you may be able to find, like Brother David Atkins, who is a guest on our show, you may be able to find a traditional church, like the Episcopal Church, that's very open to other beliefs and practices, and that's willing to accept you. Another thing is you might be able to find other esoteric groups in your community. Again, they may not be Gnostic, but they provide fellowship and support, and you can be learning different traditions, and that might be something that might be a great community for you, even if it isn't an exact fit. You can still learn a lot and benefit from the fellowship and the support. So that's another option for folks as well.
And I think those are really good options, whether they can find a Martinist group or one of the many Rosicrucian groups out there. Just to name two off the top of my head, there are many organizations that I think can give them a lot of the fundamentals that will help them, I think, to grow as Gnostics.
Yeah.
Question for our audience. Do you have any particular experiences working with a group or working solo, and what types of advantages would you feel, whether you're working with a group or your solo experience? If you feel comfortable with these, please share them in our comments, either on YouTube or on Facebook. We would definitely love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. We do really like hearing from folks, by the way, so we'd appreciate hearing from you on that question. We also want to mention that we're going to be moving now to recording our After Dark podcast. This is a podcast where we expound for about an hour on the themes in our video shows. And we usually release these shows roughly a week after Talk Gnosis video shows are taped. And you can get the links on our Facebook. These shows are also available on iTunes and on Stitcher and on our website at talkgnosis.gnosticnyc.com. However, if you support our show through Patreon, you get a secret link so you can actually watch us as we tape these shows live. And we've heard that we can be very amusing when we're quasi off camera. And sometimes our pets show up and it's a lot of fun. But please, if you are interested in supporting us, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/Gnostic, and you can pledge a small amount per video or podcast. And yes, you can cap the amount you spend each month, so you can set your own budget. And everything that you contribute does support the development of this and other fine programs. So we appreciate our donors very, very much, and thank you. Also, we do have a bit of news. There is going to be on November 8th, 2014, there is going to be a panel discussing modern Gnosticism in the Boston area. If you are in that area and are interested in attending this panel, and our very own Father Tony Sylvia will be on that panel, you can go to moderngnosticism.org and sign up or learn more about the panel. I think you may have to register. I'm not sure. Nope. Oh, Father tells me that you don't have to register. You can just show on up, but you can get directions and all the information that you need. Also, if you are in the Princeton, New Jersey area, I will be speaking at Crucible, which is a convention for mages and occultists, on the topic of developing questions for divination. The bulk of the conference is going to be on October 4th, and I'll be speaking sometime that morning for about 45 minutes. God help everybody who's listening to me. And but in any case, would love to see folks there. So if you are interested, you can go to www.crucibleconvention.com. There's also a link on the Talk Gnosis Facebook page. So awesome. Once again, we really appreciate your feedback, and feel free to contact us on our Facebook page, in the YouTube comments. You can also send an email to talkgnosis@gnosticnyc.com. And we look forward to seeing you all next week very much. So thank you for joining us, and we really appreciate your watching. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.